My name is Dennis Descentio. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the owner of BlueWave Environmental Consulting. We specialize in septic system inspections and designs. We also do consulting on vacant pieces of property for perk tests and site evaluations, and basically consult on anything related to septic systems. We also do some work on wells, water sampling. So anything related to septic systems and wells, I can answer questions all day long. So what questions do you guys have for me? Or I can just generally speak about septic systems.
What's your radius? Like how far will you go?
I'll go anywhere. Yeah, unless, typically won't go to northern Delaware because it's just a little too far. And by the time I charge to ride up there and ride back, you can usually find somebody a little bit cheaper. But Dover is usually about the limit. Yeah. And I'll do Virginia. I have gone up to Cecil County, Maryland before. Usually not very frequently, but you know, I'll generally go anywhere locally.
What's a 4-bedroom septic? A normal 4-bedroom septic, nothing special. What are they running in this area?
4 bedrooms, depending on if it's a standard system. If it doesn't have a pump, you're probably in the 12 to 13 range. With a pump, you might be in the 15 to 16. A 4-bedroom sand mound is going to be $22,000, $24,000. So they can get pricey for sure.
So I was thinking, like, for me, like when I'm going to property, like what should I look for as far as red flags when I know that the septic can be definitely a problem versus before I even call you for an inspection, I kind of say, okay, this is definitely a major problem. Like, what is the big, like?
I don't know because I typically don't see the red flags until they're there.
Okay.
If the owner can't provide information, then that would be a red flag. If they say something like, I've never had to have the septic tank pumped, then that's an issue. So the tank should be pumped every 2 to 3 years, depending on how much water is used. Yeah, I mean, those would be issues that or concerns that I would have.
What about like when we walk into a property itself? Like what are some things that that would be like something to alert us that there might be a problem with the septic? Like just land-wise?
Wet spots in the yard, dead grass, odors, water not draining in the yard, standing water in the yard, you know, those things, for sure.
You should probably know this, but what is the useful lifespan on average?
I would say 20 to 30 years. Yeah, some last longer, some don't. It just depends. Sand mounds will usually last much longer than that. There are not many sand mounds that fail prematurely unless they're poorly constructed or the testing that was used to design them was done inadequately. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we know a lot of the septics in this area are older septics.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been having an issue with at least it was, I know, like if we need to do repairs are different, but if we have to replace the system, it used to be, or might still be, a pretty big ordeal.
It's still a pretty big ordeal. It's taking 8 to 12 weeks right now to get a permit. I can usually expedite that process by doing some of the testing for the health department and turning it in with the application. And generally, we can get that cut down to about 4 weeks or so. It was 2 weeks, but now it's about 4. So
that's good.
Yeah.
It's an improvement.
Yeah, it's better.
Are they still setting it across the bridge?
No, they're still reviewing most things locally. They are being overseen by MDE in Baltimore, but most of the decisions they make are done locally.
And just for not for investor but homeowners, is there like a grant or whatever? Because if you have something that's failed and whatever, what are you going to do?
The only grant, so there are two grants locally. The more popular one is through the Bay Restoration Fund. What that will do is pay for a pre-treatment unit that takes the place of a traditional septic tank. And that helps pay just for that unit itself. Those units are required in the critical areas and for failing systems in the critical areas and new systems. Those units generally cost around $12,000. So the grant itself will pay for that unit, but it will not pay for the drain field portion of the system unless you qualify as low income. And those low income guidelines are very, very low. The other grant that sometimes is available is through the county. They have a housing rehabilitation grant, and sometimes there's low interest loans, but still you have to, very few people will qualify for those as well.
So if your septic is failing, and let's say you can do the repair, and will the health, if you can do the repair, will the health department tell you what to do with the repair, or you can kind of decide what you can afford?
No, they won't tell you. So there's a difference between repair and replace. The health department won't issue, no thanks. The health department won't issue permits for repairs. They'll only issue permits for replacements. The repairs that we do, well, I'll actually consult on some repairs. Like if we can find something to fix, that's going to be a lot better than replacing the entire thing at $25,000. If we can replace a distribution box, if we could jet out a couple of the drain fields, replace a couple sections of pipe because they're impacted by roots, that's something we can do as a repair. It will help save money.
Do you do that? Do you do jetting?
I do every now and then, but I usually like to refer it out.
Who do you refer to?
So usually I work with Barry Fippen a lot, Barry Beecham.
'Cause I need one done like right now.
Jetting?
Yeah.
So, I mean, Barry Fippen usually can get it done within a couple days. Yep.
Can you explain jetting and the situations that you use it for?
So what I would do as far as jetting is,
So what is jetting first? I don't think I
yeah, so jetting is using high pressure water, using special nozzles that will help clear out the pipes themselves. Usually,
Sorry.
no, that's fine, it's funny.
It's like, how dare you guys leave me out of the party?
Jetting is very successful in getting sludge out of lines. Not so much large amount of roots, but very good at getting sludge out. If there's something you can observe, something I can see on camera that needs to come out, jetting is the way to go. Dirt, some small roots, but mostly sludge usually. Yeah.
anything. So when do you use jetting? I'm sorry.
Usually when you can identify a blockage, whether it's sludge, dirt. A lot of times dirt will get into drain fields through the distribution box. If the concrete distribution box is starting to deteriorate, a lot of times roots and dirt can get in and start clogging up the pipes.
And if
So
you
does
have
that
roots,
save the life of your drain field?
Oh, yeah.
for a while?
Yeah, it'll definitely help.
is it preventative? Is it considered a preventative measure?
It's
Or
considered preventative.
will you consider it preventative?
I do, but I mean, the biggest thing that you can do as far as prevention is to have the septic tank pumped and to make sure they pump both compartments. So a lot of times septic tanks have two compartments, the front and the back. The front side usually holds most of the solids. It's 2/3 the size of the tank. And a lot of the guys that do the pumping don't want to dig two holes. So they won't dig up the second compartment. So over time, you get a ton of sludge building up in that second compartment. Some of that sludge leaves the tank, goes into the drain field, and then you've got problems. So-
It goes back in.
No, not to the house.
No, it goes back. It goes into the drain fields. Yeah. So if you have a septic tank, you want to make sure they pump both compartments
So every 2 to 3 years.
every 2 to 3 years.
So if that's a family of 5, it's every 2 to 3 years.
A family of 5, I would say every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They're using a lot of water.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's in our lease that they have to have a septic pump if they live there 8 months or longer. So that way we can make sure that the turns over the next tenant, we're not.
It's done. Yeah.
sitting here with a full tank, so
For the Old City Road, then, are they going to be doing it this year?
absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
So we need to get back to do both. So
Yeah.
who do you recommend for? I'm sure there's many companies, but
Yeah. There's 100 people that do it. I mean, anybody just make sure they dig up both sides. They pump both sides. Yeah.
I don't think they did last time too.
Mhm.
Only one hole.
That's the problem.
It's been really good with me in just testing water samples. So we have a house that we are concerned about, with the water, whether it's, well, sometimes we don't know what's going on. but
Mhm.
The last house he just did, the nitrates were really high, so we had to get a water treatment system in there, but he is very fast and very good about getting the water tested. You know, Dennis is very good about getting in there for us pretty quick, getting the testing back, so then that way we know which direction to go. I know that our real estate office uses Dennis like 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so we're huge with recommending Dennis and his work constantly with Whitehead Real Estate Executives as well.
Pretty much any house that has a septic, before we close on it, it's in there. He has to come out.
Yes, I always recommend, and I've even been recommending pre-listing inspections
We do that too.
for sellers.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. So Whitehead is huge with that, the pre-listing
Yeah.
inspections, yeah.
And then you can also, like, I know for sometimes you can do like official and unofficial. Or like,
Yeah,
like
just-
like a regular sample and come over and check it out.
Mhm. Yeah, we can do basically just give you a verbal report or a report in writing through an email, or we can do a full written report which has, yes, the system is satisfactory, certified for resale. So yeah, there's two different directions. Just the inspection itself with no written report is $285. With a written report, it's $385. So depending on how much information you're looking for as a buyer or a seller, we
Yeah,
can.
it's a small amount to
Yeah.
save, like,
Yeah.
$20,
Yeah.
$25,000.
Yep.
And then how about wells? What do you do with wells?
We do a lot of just water sampling.
Okay.
We do some consulting on treatment options. So I've got a couple of houses now that we're working with the owner and the realtor because there have been high levels of bacteria in the water. We can't really trying to narrow down different areas or different options of where the bacteria might be coming from. So I'll usually get the homeowners and the realtors hooked up with a well driller for chlorination, checking out the bladder tank, seeing if there are any physical issues with the well, and a lot of times we can get those resolved so the water's clean.
Anything for like wells? Anything would you recommend to do maintenance in wells, like, or to do anything that prolong the life, or?
Not necessarily. I mean, the well itself isn't going to go bad unless it's an older galvanized well that's probably 50 or 60 years old at this point. Maintenance, there's really not much you can do unless you just have to make sure the pump is running. The bladder tank is inspected periodically every couple of years. They have a lifespan of their own, and that can draw bacteria into the system. But generally, if everything is working fine, you don't usually aren't going to have any issues.
What's the cost if I guess to replace a well? If you need a new well, what's the average cost?
That's a good
range?
question.
It depends on the depth.
It depends on the depth. The deeper the well, the more expensive. But I would say for a 4-inch well, if it's not for new construction, you're probably in the $4,000 range, I think.
All in?
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the difference with new construction?
So if it's new construction, you're going to have sprinkler system. So then you've got a different speed pump. I think they usually use a variable speed pump with for sprinkler systems instead of having a large storage tank. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a separate well for just our sprinkler system.
No, I meant sprinklers.
Oh, sprinklers.
Yeah,
Okay.
because new construction requires fire suppression.
Yeah, yeah.
All new
Yeah.
construction in Salisbury requires,
Maryland.
all new construction in Maryland.
Yep.
But it's not as expensive as it used to be.
No, because the piping itself is probably next to nothing. The bigger expense was the tank and other things related to that. But I think with the variable speed pump, you do away with the storage tank. I think.
'Cause I remember we talked, my dad and I were looking at it before, and he's like, it's a massive expense. And then we talked about it like just a few months ago. He's like, oh yeah, that's an easy thing now.
I think it's only a couple $1,000s. In the big picture on new construction, it's usually not that big a deal.
Is that because it's PEX tubing or something? How did it get so cheaper?
I think people just got used to it. I think everybody just got educated or trained on installation, and it really wasn't as much of a sticker shock when it first was required.
So when I get the report from you, like what are the things you're like, okay, yeah, because if I'm looking at it, because I'm not usually using a bank or anything like that, I'm looking at it personally and like, that's an easy fix, that's something that I can you know, I can do a quick repair. No, that's going to be like a deal breaker. Because I feel like a lot of times it can be repaired, but
Yeah.
it's like absolutely can't be repaired.
I mean, if the report says that the disposal system is unsatisfactory, that usually means, in my opinion, it cannot be repaired. Usually,
So you mean the drainage?
yeah, usually it's because the drain field has failed. Usually I can identify what needs to be fixed and can make those recommendations.
Why would a drainage field fail?
So, yeah, age.
Pipes and things like that. I mean, the ground itself, the structure of the ground doesn't really change. Like
So, I mean, drain fields are made to fail. So you figure a typical drain field is 3 feet wide. It has 6 inches of stone. Then the pipe, the 4-inch pipe is on top of that. And then there's 2 inches of stone on top of that. And what happens is that pipe is perforated, has holes all the way down. And for the first 6 months, the first hole might get used. And then what happens is a biomat forms, basically a layer of sludge underneath the stone, just because of you've got all this nutrient-rich sewage going into the ground. All the bugs are starting to eat it, bacteria grows, and it forms like just a little biomat, which is a layer of sludge. So that seals itself off. So then it goes to the next hole, and then the next hole. And at the end of 20 or 30 years, that biomat is in the entire length of the drain field, so it's just not going into the ground.
but that's where jetting the line would fix that.
Usually not. So rejuvenation helps with that.
Like blasting like something that kills the biomass?
Well, what they do is they take a machine called TerraLift. It's kind of like a forward-wheeled, looks like a forklift kind of, but it has a probe that goes into the ground. They use compressed air to expand, and it breaks that biomat apart. You can actually see the ground rise.
So it's not inside the tube itself? It's
No.
just the stone?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Didn't we do this one in Olive Zero? I think we did a rejuvenation in one of the properties. That
No, that was it. We jetted the line.
jetted,
Yeah.
did it?
Yeah, rejuvenation is a temporary fix. Most people are charging anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000, and it gives you about another year left on the system. So it's an expensive Band-Aid.
And then what's gotta happen? The whole thing's gotta be redone?
I know people that will do it 2 or 3 times just to not have to spend $20,000, but it is a Band-Aid. Yeah.
So if I've got drain fields in place, why you can't just dig it up, clean out the stones, put new stones down?
The health department will not allow that.
Is there a reason?
They will tell you that the ground is already saturated, and by putting new stone and new pipe in, you're really not alleviating the issue of the ground being saturated already. So they want to go to a virgin area altogether. Yeah.
So it's going to be like a mound system at that point?
It just depends on the soils and water table. How sandy is the soil, and where is the water table when it's at its highest point during the year. Those are the 2 biggest factors.
Okay. Then another question, as far as people who live in the property, or your house, what I know there's a bunch of stuff that you're not supposed to put it in the drain or whatever. Is it real, or is it okay to just do, or something to avoid?
Yeah, you're better off not dumping a lot of chemicals down the drain. The more grease and fat you use that goes down the drain, the more frequently you're going to have it pumped out. So yeah, just you have to keep that in mind. Yep. So that's a high water alarm. So there's a separate float inside the pump chamber that when the water level gets higher than it should be, the float switch turns on and the alarm turns on. So you have to call somebody to have the system pumped out, and then you have to call somebody to diagnose what's wrong with the pump. Either the pump's gone bad, the float switch has gone bad, the power is out at the pump. There could be a number of things. But yeah, you're going to have to call a septic installer or a septic hauler, a pumper, to at least come out and pump the water down. I can come diagnose what the issue is, but I'm probably going to tell you it's going to have to be pumped out first, because if the water is that high, you're not going to be able to see anything inside the pump chamber anyway. Yeah.
Now, am I understanding it right with the mound system, you were saying that's because of the water table? And
Yeah, mound systems are used to increase the distance, the vertical distance, to a limiting layer such as clay or the water table, not only for functionality purposes, but for also the purposes of trying to protect the groundwater by increasing the separation from the pipes themselves.
So that would be like, if I'm close to like a critical area, I would be required to do more of that?
Yep, because depending on where you are in the county, will factor into where the area of the groundwater protection report, which determines how close you can get to the groundwater with sewage, and how far away you have to stay away.
So do you guys use a peat moss system?
Peat moss are not, they would be considered innovative and alternative in Maryland. There are very few in Maryland because the maintenance is a nightmare, and it's expensive. I mean, they're great when they first go in. There are a couple around the county, but peat moss is only found in one place in the world. It's very difficult to extract the peat moss from the unit itself and then put new peat moss in.
You say the maintenance is a nightmare. I have a peat moss system.
You do.
Why do you say that?
How old is it?
Not very old.
Okay, that's good.
Every 5 years?
I don't. Where do you live?
I live in Delmar, Delaware side.
Okay. Yeah, so they're used in Delaware a lot. They're used in Virginia even more, and then they're used even more the farther south you go. Because peat moss you can only get it in Ireland, and it's expensive because when you have to exchange that peat moss, when you take all that old stuff out, it's classified as hazardous waste, so it has to go somewhere special, and then it's just expensive to bring new peat moss in.
So when I mentioned that septic alarm, that was actually my septic alarm.
Okay. So and it's only 5 years old? Less?
It's got to be around that.
Okay.
I'll have to find out.
Is the alarm still going off?
No.
Is the light still on? So what happened?
It just went on. I shut it off. Hasn't come back on yet.
So it's possible it's on a time, your system's on a timer, and if you use more water than what it's allotted for during the time dose, then the water will rise and turn the high water alarm on.
Let's go with that until I can get you out there.
Yeah, good. I mean, if it went off, if the light, you silenced the alarm and the light stayed on, and then later on the light went off. So it said the water level sounds like it dropped on its own, which means the pump was doing its thing, but you're probably using more water than what the timer was allowing. That's.
Is there like a layman for what a peat moss system is?
Yeah, so they have a pump that, I guess the modules themselves are about the size of this table, about 4x4, 5x5, and they're full of peat moss, which is a specific form of moss. Looks like spaghetti, like gray spaghetti. Yeah, it becomes a filter. So the wastewater gets trickled over top of that. Bacteria, it becomes like a media for bacteria, so the bacteria help break down some of the nutrients in the sewage.
Where did all the gases go?
Out in the air.
I was
Yeah.
looking at a fourplex that had a peat moss system.
Uh-huh.
Around the edges, it was wet.
Yeah.
I said, yep, and I'm looking at this.
So they're usually elevated, like on top of a bed of sand. So they're usually about this tall out of the ground, then mounded down. So they will put them on top of like a small sand mound just to help with the infiltration and filtration.
Do you see a trend that the health department has right now that's going from traditional to mound system? Or like, is there a trend, or is it kind of still scattered?
Or is it more like a reflex because they're,
That's kind of my.
Like,
I
I don't
want to
have
know
time to deal with
if
it.
if I buy a new property, do I think I'm gonna go all in mound system? This is my new thing.
So I think there is an easy way out with a mound system. They have had quite a few systems that they've designed and permitted fail prematurely, that they've actually had to go back, use state money to replace the systems. So there is that level of concern of their own liability. So yeah, there is part of that. The other part to it is, as you get these homes that are 50, 60 years old, they're on their second or third septic system, and they're running out of room, so they use sand mounds to overcome some of those site limitations.
But they can't go back to the original after all that time. They're getting
If it's still there, it just depends. There is some research that says that if you disconnect a septic system and it doesn't absorb any effluent, that it will kind of rejuvenate itself, and you may be able to go back to it later on.
You're mostly dealing with biomass. It's going to
They will die. They'll die
it's gonna
off.
die off.
Yep. Yep. There is some research that says you can go back to it
Probably.
if they're still there. But
Right, but I mean, could I use the same site? Because I think that's the biggest issue is that you only have so many sites on a land where you can put a septic. So if I've got 2 sites,
yeah.
and both have been used, but the other one hasn't been used for 40 years.
Yep. Sometimes you can go back. Yep. Yep. Just depends. A lot of times, depending on the site, that system may not even be there.
Right.
The pipes might be gone.
But you can put in.
It's possible.
Now, what do you mean by that site may not be there? Is it biodegradable to the point where it's I don't know, it's all disintegrated, or what do you mean by the site may not be there?
Well, so a lot of times when a replacement system is installed, the process of constructing that system may cause damage to the existing system.
Okay.
You know, you might have to install a new pipe from here to there and go through the existing system, and you might wind up losing some pipe, destroying pieces of it. So it's possible. Yeah, it just depends on the site. Everything's different. Every site's different.
And can you, if you just want to know how old the system is or how long was it installed, whatever, is there access to the public for that?
You can request the records through the health department. You can do a Freedom of Information request. Generally, they will get the information to you within 24 hours.
So
So
you have to go physically request it, or
you can email one of the clerical staff at the health department, and they're very good.
Cool.
Yeah, they're very good at what they do. Very friendly, and they will generally get stuff back to you within 24 hours.
Awesome.
Yep.
So what about holding tanks?
So holding tanks are a last resort. Holding tanks are only used on existing dwellings that have a failing septic system that cannot be replaced. The last thing you want is a holding tank. They're typically sized for a week's worth of flow. So for a 3-bedroom house, you're looking at about 3,000 gallons. And that's all you get. So when that tank fills up, you have to pump it out. And right now, 3,000 gallons will cost you almost $1,000 to pump out.
So $4,000 a month maybe.
Well, so if you're on a holding tank, you'll have to do certain things. Usually, it's only reserved for owner-occupied homes because you can't trust a tenant to conserve water. So, and then if you've got an owner-occupied home, then you're going to want to go through your house and install all new fixtures, all low-flow fixtures. Really conserve water as far as doing laundry, switching out all your toilets.
So pretty much it's like.
But if you're smart about it, and I mean if it's just you in the house, it's great. If you've got a family in the house that's on a holding tank, you might get by with every 3 to 4 weeks. So you still have $1,000 a month just to pump out. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's pretty much like that's a no.
2 years you buy this.
It's a death sentence for a property. And there have been a couple of holding tanks.
I think you looked at one for us. Like when we were looking at buying a property, like this one's probably gonna get a holding tank.
I can think of 2 that have holding tanks right now, and the owner willingly put them in. Willingly, because apparently their realtor was telling people that it only needed to be pumped out every 6 months. So That was unfortunate. But yeah, that's going to be,
Now, this
it's
is kind of
expensive.
completely off topic, but I know like they have some like these systems that you can utilize, and they're not septic systems. I don't know if there's anything like that with septic systems where it creates like it goes into a holding tank. The tank itself breaks all the organic matter down, and it becomes like you can drain it off into a biogas, into a fuel. It can do anything. It can do human waste. It can do animal waste. It can do like anything organic that goes in there can come out as fertilizer and as a biogas. Do they have anything like that for? Like
So that would be like getting
The
into the,
biodigester.
yeah, that would be, I'm not aware of any because they're very expensive and I don't know if it would be cost effective at a single family
trying to
home.
figure that versus a holding tank.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I was faced with a holding tank, then I would be looking at doing stuff like gray water separation, where everything you flush doesn't, or everything that leaves the house doesn't necessarily go into the holding tank. You've got wash water from the washing machine, kitchen sink. You don't want necessarily all of that going into the septic system. You can reuse some of that.
Is that something you just divert on your own?
I can't remember if Maryland Department of the Environment has established regulations on that yet. I know that was one of their goals a couple of years ago, but I don't know if that's something you would want to do on your own, just because the potential for cross-contamination and diverting the wrong water somewhere. Yeah. But I bet those systems probably aren't cheap either, just because of the change in the plumbing and the storage that you have to have for some of that and the treatment.
So do you guys install those alternative systems that do the handling of the biomass?
No, that's getting into, I'm not even sure if they exist for residential use. You're talking about digesters, which are very expensive, and then you're talking about wastewater treatment plant level operations.
Pretty much, your only solution would be to hook it up to like a public.
Yeah.
That's your solution.
If you've got, yes, yeah, and the Bay Restoration Fund will pay for connection to city water or to city sewer too. So
Okay, all the way through, like from the house,
Mhm.
if it's available.
if it's available, sure.
How far does it have to be from the house? Like on the street, or can it be actually like a mile off or half? a mile?
Generally, it's within eye shot, within sight distance of the house,
Okay.
in the street.
Okay.
Generally in the street,
All right.
because the city is not going to want you to connect to city sewer unless you're contiguous with city boundaries. That way, you sign a pre-annexation agreement. So when you sell your house and the next person buys it, they're the ones responsible for annexing and paying city taxes.
For longevity, what would you say like the top 3 no-nos are for just in general septic tanks?
Make sure it's pumped every 2 to 3 years. Have it inspected every 2 to 3 or 4 years to make sure certain components aren't breaking down. So certain concrete components in the system will break down, like concrete baffles will fall off the tank. Distribution boxes only last 10 or 15 years depending on how they were constructed, especially the concrete ones. They'll deteriorate and fall apart. Don't drive over it, and just be mindful of how much water you use.
Don't drive over it?
Well, you don't want to drive. You don't want to drive over your drain field and crush part of it.
Have you seen that happen?
Absolutely. I've seen moving trucks, tree trucks. I've seen entire trucks inside septic tanks. So
That's a bad action.
another bad one, which is the septic system is not the biggest problem at that point, are fire trucks. Fire trucks just pull up in the yard, put out a fire, and crush the tank. But at that point, the septic tank is not a big deal because they're fighting the fire. Yeah. So that's what I said. You got bigger problems at that point.
Will insurance cover that if that's happening? Like part of your, because they.
I have heard that homeowners insurance does cover failing septic systems. If it's a fire truck, I would think.
If they can get out of it, they will though.
Right?
Okay, well, it's an interesting idea. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any insurances that you can take out on septic tanks? Like I know, like they have like those ones for your appliances and all this. Do you know of any that you can like?
I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if it can be part of your homeowner's insurance, if they've got a separate addendum. An insurance agent would be good to ask.
Yeah.
Should have an insurance agent come talk to
Yeah,
you.
we actually
Oh, yeah,
had last
we
time.
did.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm gonna tag her in.
Who was it?
And Melissa, right?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
She was awesome.
Yeah, she's nice.
Anybody else? Anything else?
Good.
Dennis, plethora of
Okay.
information. Thank
Yep.
you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.